September is National Preparedness Month, so we'll be talking to people from the local emergency management agency, the Southwest Indiana Red Cross chapter, and the Evansville Fire Department about what disasters we should be prepared for locally. They'll also provide some tips on the things you can do and the things to have on hand to be prepared. That's coming up next on WNIN Newsmakers. Our first guest will discuss what potential disasters we might face locally and how local officials prepare to handle those disasters. Cliff Weaver of the Evansville-Vanderburgh County Emergency Management Agency is joining us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, you know, when we think about disasters, we just had one in our area just a few months ago. Tell us what disasters our agency, the Emergency Management Agency, is prepared to deal with locally.
Okay, the EMA, we do what's called a risk assessment, and we have to go through and look at historical data. And obviously here in Evansville, that includes floods and storms, tornadoes, and we do have an earthquake risk, but it seems our highest hazard here is going to be storms and tornadoes. So that's what we're trying to gear up for more, seeing people, be prepared for that.
So I've had the opportunity to be in the command center in the Sheriff's Department off of 41. Really kind of give us a peek into that facility and how you monitor situations, how you respond to situations. Let's start first locally on some of the smaller disasters we could have.
Okay, well, what we do, we have a very close working relationship with the National Weather Service in Paducah. And they always give us heads up when we have the potential for bad weather. We see the storm warnings headed our way, then we activate our staff. We have only 3 full-time staff, but we have a volunteer staff of about 15 to 20. Some of those people are specially trained in weather monitoring, weather observing, and we'll bring them in. We have some special programs where we can monitor the radar and how unstable the atmosphere is. And at that point, depending on what we see coming, we'll start getting more troops ready, standing by. We have a warehouse and we have generators and vehicles and things like that, just in case we have to do damage assessment.
So beyond the tornadoes, we recently saw the explosion, kind of a smaller scale disaster on Weinbach Avenue. Tell us how your agency prepares and also responds to things such as those.
That particular incident obviously was an unannounced event, so it was kind of like all hands on deck as soon as it happened. What we did for that, basically, we helped coordinate some of the other outside agencies coming in. We coordinated a lot of information to Homeland Security at the state. We weren't quite sure at the beginning what happened, so we had to prepare, for the worst in case there was other events. We ended up, after a few minutes and all the patients got transported away from the scene, it was, we settled down and joined in with the unified command with the fire department and other agencies. And at that point, it pretty much turned into a damage assessment and recovery effort.
So those, as we mentioned, were kind of smaller scale disasters. Talk to us about preparing for some of the larger scale disasters that we might see in our area, like major earthquakes or large floods, those types of things. How do you prepare for that? And then how do you deploy when something massive like that happens?
Okay. Also in Indiana, we have a plan that we have the state divided up into 10 districts. In southern Indiana, southwest Indiana, we have District 10, which is 12 counties. And we all work together. All of our EMA people, all of our staff, we share resources, we share people. So in a bigger event, when we deplete our county resources, then we start reaching out to our surrounding counties. And then at that point, we activate maybe other counties to come in and help us, or we activate the Homeland Security from Indianapolis And if it's a really big event, we'll activate Task Force 1, which is the FEMA team in Indianapolis, to come down and help us.
Well, and regular citizens can get involved in terms of disaster response as well, correct? So whenever you're deploying, not only the District 10, those volunteers, there's a special team of volunteers, I think, CERT, right, that you
Correct.
can also deploy. Tell us a little bit about that.
CERT actually is a FEMA program that we've been teaching in Evansville since 2001. It originally started with the Evansville Fire Department, and then it transitioned over to EMA probably about 15 years ago. We've done probably close to 45 classes, and we have teams scattered all over Evansville and Vanderburgh County. If you want more information about that, you can contact our office. We usually do 1 or 2 classes a year, and it's a 7-night program. We go through the FEMA curriculum, and we teach you how to be like a mini rescue team for your neighborhood.
Well, and it's very impressive in terms of how you bring agencies together to really coordinate response and really prepare. I think people in our area could be feel very comfortable that we are well prepared for what we might be hit with. So tell us how you bring these agencies together, maybe some of the exercises you do to make sure that we're on the spot whenever something happens.
We get a lot of compliments from other parts of the country about Indiana in general. It's not just Evansville, but Indiana in general. We always work well together. We don't have any turf battles, especially in Evansville or Vanderburgh County. We're here to do the job, and we do whatever it takes to get the job done. So the Weinbach incident was a good example. The tornado in 2005 was another example. We just work together and we have a unified command. Everybody knows what their job is, and we just do what we have to do to get things done.
Well, and actually it's volunteer-led, and you guys are very, have a heart for helping other people. So not even just in our area for disaster response, but you actually had some people go down to Dawson Springs whenever the tornado happened. Tell us a little bit about what you learned down there.
The Dawson Springs event, we were actually in our emergency operations center that night monitoring for Evansville, and we actually saw those tornadoes develop and actually move through. We knew they got hit hard, and we actually could see the tornado debris in some of our programs. And so we wanted to respond, but we knew the roads were closed, the wires were down, it was not safe for anybody to go down there, so we actually had to hold back some of our people from responding spontaneously, which everybody wants to help, but has to be safe. So a few days later, we were contacted by the Nut Club, and we were really proud to be part of that group to go down and help coordinate their response. So when we went down there, it was pretty devastating, and the Nut Club should be really proud of the work they did.
So whenever you go down in that kind of capacity, where you're not necessarily in an official capacity, do you also watch and kind of learn from their response and take those learnings back to here to retrain for our response?
Well, actually in that event, we kind of did maintain our positions. We coordinated with the officials down there. They were pretty much overwhelmed because the whole area was impacted, so they were shorthanded. So we actually continued our positions in Kentucky, and we did face-to-face meetings with them and a lot of communications to make sure they knew what we were doing, and whatever they needed, we helped them do it.
All right. So whenever you think about helping people prepare for large-scale disasters, we always think it's never going to happen to us, right? So again, how can families be prepared? What are some of the things that people should do and make sure that they have in place in order to be prepared?
These are things we try to tell people all the time. Have a plan in your house, have a plan for your family, have a kit, have a go bag, and on the FEMA website, which is ready.gov, there's all kinds of information you can go look at and actually download plans that you can work through. But the most important thing is have a conversation with your family and have a plan ahead of time. When we call it blue sky planning, when you know what you're going to do. Because, for example, again, I'll go back to Weinbach. There may be a time you can't get back to your house or you have to evacuate immediately. where do you go? Your family needs to know where those places are. If you're going to go to your church, go to your school, because if you can't go to your house and just say your phones are dead or the phones don't work, where's your family going to start looking for you? You may have a vehicle. You could use, I say vehicles can be used like lifeboats because you can put equipment and supplies in your vehicle. Okay. And you can also stay warm, have shelter, charge your cell phone, all that in your vehicle. So it's kind of like a lifeboat for your vehicles.
All right, great information. Thank you so much, Cliff Weaver, for being with us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now we're joined by Beth Sweeney, Executive Director of the American Red Cross of Southwest Indiana. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So when we think of Red Cross response, we often think of fires and tornadoes and things like that. But what are some of the other disasters that you are prepared to respond to?
Well, you know, the most common disaster that we respond to is house fires on a daily basis in the Southwest chapter. You mentioned other severe weather events, flooding, things like that. But of course, probably the most recent that everyone would be familiar with was the explosion on Weinbach Avenue. The Red Cross was very involved, setting up a canteen down at the site for emergency workers and then helping all of those displaced families.
So when we see Red Cross on the news and things like that, we often see your help assisting with food and things like that. That's the very visible part of the Red Cross response. But what are some of the other things that you're doing behind the scenes that people might not realize that you're involved with and that you're helping families with as well?
Sure. Well, you know, a lot of people did see us down at the site helping those first responders with meals, snacks, a place to cool off, those types of things. But what you didn't see probably was at the reception center just down the road at Vogel School, and that was where our volunteers were assisting those families that had been evacuated from the area and had been displaced and weren't sure when, if ever, they would be allowed to be back in their homes. So we were working closely with them on a one-on-one basis, getting them registered into the Red Cross system, talking to them about some of their basic immediate needs. Families that are displaced in a disaster, we provide a lot of different types of assistance, including financial assistance to meet some of those needs, like do they need a place to stay, a hotel room, food, clothing, some of those immediate needs. In this situation, it was mass care because we were dealing with several families. So we were working with all of them to work on, you know, a temporary place to stay and meals and those types of things. So that was the initial response. We had a community partner that put people up in a hotel for 3 nights, so we didn't have to open a shelter per se, but we were out at that hotel providing meals through other community partners and the amazing businesses and restaurants that just showed up with things to help out. And then we have caseworkers that work with those families on a recovery plan. What are some of those needs moving forward, and who can we connect them with in the community to help put them on that path to recovery?
So those are, and Cliff and I talked about this, those are what we would call kind of small scale disasters. Even though they're big disasters to a family, they're at a smaller scale. When we think about larger scale disasters, we're talking earthquakes, Katrina, the flooding, those types of large scale disasters. How does the Red Cross's response differ in those types of scenarios, and how do you mobilize, and who do you need to mobilize in order to respond?
Well, we have some amazing disaster volunteers right here in our area in the Southwest chapter, but we also have Red Cross volunteers that deploy from all parts of the country, and including staff members as well. So our teams are ready, especially in severe weather season like we're in now. We have teams that are ready to deploy and help us in situations. So if there were a situation like we had back in 2005 with the tornado, we would have teams that would be deployed here to assist us with helping those families, doing those disaster assessments on homes, setting up shelters, looking at some of that long-term recovery and what people are going to need once those immediate needs are met. So very similar response, but on a much larger scale. And thankfully, you know, the Red Cross being a national organization and international organization, we have those plans in place to do so and mobilize at any time.
Well, as you mentioned, we have a wonderful community that always just rallies around and wants to really help people whenever it's small disasters, larger disasters. So people are often wondering where to go, what to do, what they can do. And we've seen that they want to give money, and a lot of times they want to give items. We even saw that in the Western Kentucky response. So what do you tell people who are wanting to respond to these types of things? How should they help? How should they funnel their energy? And are you taking donations of items and things like that, or should they think in different ways?
Sure. Well, the Red Cross accepts financial donations because we do provide that financial assistance to families who are displaced. So those financial donations really allow us to help get that money to families so that they can make decisions on their own and help, own their recovery plan, so to speak, which is that path to building resilience. We don't take in-kind donations, but we do get a lot of calls when something happens. We have this or we have that, and we'd love to be able to help. So we usually put them in touch with other agencies that might take those types of donations. We don't do that at the Red Cross. We do financial donations to help.
Well, we talked with Cliff about this, but we're never properly prepared, right? We're always thinking that I'll do that next week or I'll get around to that. So let's talk again how people can be best prepared for both the smaller scale disasters, the things like fires and things like that, and then a larger scale disaster. What should families do to prepare? What should individuals do to prepare?
Well, the Red Cross provides a lot of services to help people prepare. Actually, we do youth prevention programs in our schools to teach about fire safety and preparing for disasters. We talk to kids about if this should happen in your home, do you have an escape route in place? You should talk to your family about, putting that plan in place. We also install free smoke detectors in people's homes. People that need installation of those, we do that for free. We have a whole team of volunteers that do that, and we also talk to them about a fire safety plan. So there's a lot you can do in advance to get ready for this. Like Cliff said, talking to your family members, having that plan, knowing where to go, that's the most important part of being able to be prepared should a disaster happen.
Well, it takes an army of people and an army of volunteers to respond to things like this, and many people do want to help, but are you looking for volunteers? Are you looking for people to sign up to deploy or to do even smaller things like serve a meal whenever a disaster happens?
Now more than ever, we need those disaster volunteers. We are seeing more and more severe weather events happening in our area and across this country, wildfires, hurricanes, all kinds of severe weather events. The Eastern Kentucky flooding, we deployed volunteers from here to help with that, as well as the Western Kentucky tornado. We have what are called disaster action team volunteers, and those are the ones that will show up when a fire happens, when any kind of severe weather event happens. They go in teams of 2, and they work right one-on-one with that family to provide that comfort and care and provide that assistance. The requirements for that are about 10 hours of training. Most of that can be done virtually. It is a little bit of a heavier lift than some of our other volunteer opportunities in that we ask that you can volunteer to be on call for 2 12-hour shifts every month. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to get called, but if a fire should happen in the area that you're willing to respond to, if it's just in Vanderburgh County, that you would be on our disaster action team schedule and be ready to take that call. And you can also deploy to other parts of the country as well if you become a DAP volunteer.
Wonderful. Well, we were talking about disaster preparedness, but there's also a need that the Red Cross has that's very important to individuals, and we're talking about blood donations and blood services. Tell us a little bit more about the need there. What happens whenever we're crucially low on blood, and how can people get involved in terms of giving blood?
Well, the Red Cross supplies 40% of the nation's blood supply, so it is critical that we have those donors come in and give when they can. There are lots of people that can donate blood, but only about 3% of our population does. So it's really important to try to give if you can. When you think about how you or a family member could be impacted, you may know someone who has cancer that needs that life-saving blood transfusion, someone who's been in an accident that needs blood, or some type of life-altering disease. It's just critical that we keep that supply up to be able to provide to all of our area hospitals like Deaconess and Ascension. And something else a lot of people may not know is blood only has a shelf life of about 42 days. So we constantly need to replenish that supply. So it's really important. I just gave blood a few weeks ago, and it's a very simple process. You can do most everything ahead of time online, filling out your health information, and then you can come in, sign up for an appointment, come on in, and it just takes a few minutes to be able to give that amazing gift.
Great. Well, wonderful information. Thanks for all the work that you do for the Red Cross. We appreciate you, Beth.
Thanks so much. Good to see you.
Finally, we're joined by Chief Mike Larson, a Division Chief and Public Information Officer for the Evansville Fire Department. Thanks for coming in.
Glad to be here.
So, of course, Evansville Fire Department, we always think of you responding to fires, but what other types of emergencies does the fire department respond to?
We have a very wide range of instances that we respond to. You know, kind of the joke around the department is if someone calls 911 and they're not sure who to call for an incident, they call us. We're very lucky. We have a lot of firefighters that are very crafty in their own way, and if there's a problem, we're pretty much guaranteed somebody on scene is going to be able to figure out a way to solve it and have a good outcome with it. So, but you know, technically, if there's a hazardous materials leak, car accidents, we do confined space, and we're talking about the house explosion. We shore up buildings if there's a collapse or anything like that, so that would fall in the confined space. Obviously, water rescues with the Ohio River being in our backyard. I mean, it is just such a very wide range of things. Severe storms, Cliff was talking about that. So anytime there's a severe storm, we're responding all over town for a variety of things, wires down, limbs down, you name it. Again, we do it.
Even medical emergencies, correct? So the fire departments as first responders, they're also trained as what, EMTs, those types of things? What types of training do they go to be prepared to respond to all types of incidences like this?
Yeah, so anybody that would accept a job with the fire department, they go through a minimum of 6 weeks of EMT training, and so all of our firefighters are trained to an EMT level of service for medical runs. And yes, you're absolutely right. A lot of people are surprised if they call 911 for an ambulance that a fire truck will show up first, and we provide first response medical care for people. And they're, like I said, they're really kind of surprised that a big red fire truck shows up. And I've even had people say, I didn't call the fire department. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, we're here, we do first response and then kind of clear that up with them. But yeah, so we do EMS calls as well.
So you mentioned the special teams, all of the special teams that are part of the fire department. Explain to us some of we're talking about people being prepared for disasters, but tell us how the fire department is prepared for all of the different instances that they respond to and how you train for all of this.
Wow, good question. I mean, as far as the training goes, it really just comes from past experiences, and not only just in Evansville, across the country as disasters happen. We learn from every incident that we respond to. And again, not just in Evansville. So you may remember the 4th of July rescue of the child that fell down like a well casing 3 or 4 years ago. That was something where our crews were just thinking on their feet. It ended up being a swing set seat that they lowered in this hole to save this child. That's not something we carry on our trucks with us. Right. That's an out of the box kind of thinking, what can we do to make this better? So as far as the training goes, again, we go back to past instances, we create those situations and just put our crews through that and you know, spray the water on the fire. We nail the boards together on walls, different things of that nature. We go up on tall buildings and rappel down with our rope rescue team. So it's just kind of keeping those skills sharp, and that's how we prepare for those instances.
And then whenever there's a larger scale fire or disaster, you're really pulling in not just people who are on duty, but do you ever pull in people who are off duty or from outside areas in order to assist whenever the incident is really quite large?
Well, the citizens of Evansville should be very comfortable, and we're very blessed. Our department is, right now we are fully staffed. A lot of departments across the country are not. So we have 273 firefighters on our department, and as far as calling in extra help, very often that doesn't happen a lot because we have 14 fire stations to draw from. So even on a second alarm fire, yes, we may call in some off-duty personnel to man our stations as the other crews go out, but we're very blessed that we are fully staffed and our crews are trained for pretty much anything that's presented to them.
Well, you do a lot of public education as well. Tell us about some of the ways that you help students and just people, individuals in our community be prepared for fire safety and disasters themselves.
So you're right. The schools, we do a lot with schools. We actually have an individual that is trained as a fire and life safety educator. So He goes to the schools, talks to the kids a lot about, obviously, stop, drop, and roll, not playing with matches, things of that nature. But also, if there ever is an incident where a child was playing with matches and there was a fire, we have this individual does talk to the family members and the child and tries to educate them more on what they should or shouldn't do to try and help that child get away from that curiosity of matches or lighters or anything like that, and how that situation happened.
So how do you suggest that people be prepared for fires, those types of disasters, and what do you suggest that people should have on hand in the event of a disaster, whether that be a small-scale disaster or maybe, say, an earthquake or a larger-scale disaster?
So this is kind of a repeat of what Cliff said and Beth. You know, we have to just practice it. We have to be prepared for that. And what I like to tell people if they ask me is practice those drills at home, especially with young children. And it doesn't have to be like super structured. You can make it fun. With my kids, when they were younger, we would talk about where we would meet outside. And then we would say, okay, if there's a fire in the house, where are you going to go? This way's blocked. So they would go, we would meet outside. We have a pole barn in our backyard, so that's where we would meet. Mm-hmm. You have just a meeting place to know that everybody in the home is out safe. Mm-hmm. And it sounds kind of odd to say, but even if you have visitors at home, let's say grandma and grandpa are there, it wouldn't be a bad idea, hey, before you go to bed, if there happens to be a fire tonight, this is where we meet. Oh, yeah. So, you know, it's just, we always get comfortable when it's just us, mm-hmm. but if you have a visitor, you know, who knows when an emergency is going to happen.
Well, and I think sometimes we assume how we're going to respond in a disaster, but we really need to practice, right? Because you never know how you're going to react.
Absolutely. Practice makes perfect. So that's really the key.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chief Larson. We appreciate all your time and information.
Glad to be here.
Well, thanks to all of our guests for talking about disaster preparedness. Next week, we'll take a look at all of the fall festivals and other events coming up in our area. Thanks for watching WNIN Newsmakers.